Breaking news out of the Horn of Africa, where a fragile peace is on the verge of shattering. A shocking new alliance may be rewriting the geopolitical map, sparking fresh conflict and threatening to plunge Ethiopia back into a devastating war. Just when we thought the Pretoria Peace Agreement had brought a measure of stability, reports are flooding in of new violence erupting in the strategic Afar region. In early November 2025, the Afar Regional Government issued a startling accusation. They claimed that forces from the neighboring Tigray region, the TPLF, had crossed the border, seizing as many as 6 villages in key districts like Megel. They reported that civilian pastoralist communities were being shelled with heavy weaponry. This wasn't just a minor border skirmish. It was a significant incursion that immediately set off alarm bells. The local response was swift. On November 1st, residents in the town of Abala and surrounding areas took to the streets in peaceful protest. But their condemnation came with a stunning twist. They weren't just blaming the TPLF. Their signs and chants pointed to a much more sinister collaboration, what they called TPLF Sha'abiya cooperation. Sha'abiya, for those who don't know, is a common name for the ruling party in Eritrea, led by Isaias Afwerki. The protesters' demand was clear and simple. The people should return to their villages. The Tigray forces must withdraw from the Afar land they are occupying. Now, as you'd expect, the Tigray interim administration and the TPLF have vehemently denied these allegations. They've called the claims entirely baseless. Instead, they've turned the tables, accusing the Ethiopian Federal Government of stirring the pot. They allege that Addis Ababa is secretly supporting Afar-based proxy groups, like the so-called Tigray Peace Force, and even carrying out drone strikes to intentionally instigate conflict and undermine Tigray's stability. So we have two completely contradictory narratives, a classic case of, he said, with civilians caught in the deadly crossfire. But the real bombshell here is the allegation of a TPLF-Fano Eritrea alliance. This is a geopolitical U-turn of epic proportions. To understand how shocking this is, you have to remember the war from 2020 to 2022. Back then, the Ethiopian Federal Government and Eritrea were allies, fighting together against the TPLF. It was an alliance of convenience aimed at crushing a common enemy. Now the tables have seemingly turned completely. The new alleged alignment pits the TPLF and Eritrea against the Ethiopian Federal Government and its Afar regional allies. It is a mind-bending reversal that shows just how fluid and treacherous the politics of the region are. So, what could possibly motivate these two bitter, sworn enemies to suddenly join forces? Let's break it down. For Eritrea's leader, Isaias Afwerki, the Pretoria Peace Agreement was seen as a profound betrayal. His goal was the complete and total elimination of the TPLF as a political and military force. When the peace deal stopped short of that, leaving the TPLF intact, he was reportedly furious. By allegedly teaming up with them now, he can achieve two key objectives. First, he can keep the pot boiling in Ethiopia, particularly in the strategically vital Afar trade corridor, ensuring his neighbor remains weak and unstable. Second, and perhaps more importantly, it is a direct counter to Ethiopia's recent and very vocal ambitions for its own access to a Red Sea port, a move that Asmara sees as a direct threat to its sovereignty and regional influence. For the TPLF, the motivation is one of survival and leverage. They are feeling immense pressure from the federal government in Addis Ababa. By allegedly exploiting the growing rift between Ethiopia and Eritrea, they can create a powerful distraction. It allows them to counter federal pressure, consolidate their own power within Tigray, and push back against what they see as the government's failure to uphold its end of the peace agreement. It's a high-stakes gamble, using an old enemy to fight a new one. These aren't just rumors from the battlefield either. The Ethiopian government itself has formally sounded the alarm. Back in October 2025, Addis Ababa sent an official notification to the UN Secretary-General. In it, they explicitly accuse Eritrea of actively preparing for war and, crucially, of collaborating with the TPLF to destabilize and fragment the country. This is a formal, high-level accusation on the international stage, lending significant weight to the claims we're seeing on the ground. All of this puts the Pretoria Peace Agreement, signed in late 2022, on life support. The agreement was celebrated for ending one of the 21st century's deadliest conflicts, but it now looks incredibly fragile. The core tenets of the deal are being violated one by one. The cessation of hostilities is clearly endangered by these new border incursions and the alleged counter-drone strikes. A ceasefire is meaningless if both sides are actively fighting. Furthermore, the agreement left major issues unresolved, and those chickens are now coming home to roost. Critically, it failed to settle the political and territorial status of disputed areas like Western Tigray and these very borderlands in Afar without a clear political roadmap for these contested zones. It was only a matter of time before violence flared up again. This conflict in Afar is a direct consequence of that unresolved impasse. The political situation has also been deteriorating. In May 2025, the federal government took the step of formally revoking the TPLF's legal status as a political party. From the TPLF's perspective, this completely undermined the spirit of the political settlement, signaling that the government had no real intention of reintegrating them into the country's political fabric. When you look at the big picture, it becomes clear that the Pretoria Accord was a successful ceasefire, but it was an incomplete political settlement. It stopped the fighting, but it didn't solve the underlying problems that caused the war in the first place. The implications of this new flare-up are terrifying. First and foremost is the humanitarian risk. The Tigray war already caused immense suffering, with hundreds of thousands of lives lost and millions displaced. Renewed fighting threatens to trigger another wave of civilian casualties, displacement, and a deepening humanitarian crisis in a region that has barely begun to recover. Aid organizations are already stretched thin, and another major conflict would be a catastrophe. Then there's the economic threat. The Afar region isn't just some remote, dusty borderland. It is Ethiopia's economic lifeline, the main highway and railway connecting the landlocked country of over 120 million people to the port of Djibouti runs directly through Afar. This corridor handles the vast majority of Ethiopia's international trade. Any disruption, any instability poses a grave threat to the entire Ethiopian economy, which is already struggling with inflation and debt. Whoever controls this zone holds immense strategic leverage over the entire country. This conflict isn't new. It has deep historical roots. For generations, there has been tension between the traditionally pastoralist Afar communities and the agriculturalist Tigrayans over access to grazing land and scarce water resources. These local grievances are now being manipulated and amplified by high-stakes national and regional power plays, and that leads us to the most dangerous possibility of all, the risk of a full-scale interstate war. By allegedly aligning with Eritrea, the TPLF has elevated this from a domestic or internal conflict to a regional one. We are no longer just talking about a civil war within Ethiopia's borders. We are looking at a proxy conflict that could easily spiral into a direct confrontation between Ethiopia and Eritrea, two nations with a bitter history of war. The entire Horn of Africa is a tinderbox, and this TPLF Eritrea alliance could be the match that lights the fuse. The international community needs to pay very close attention to what's happening before it's too late. This is a complex and rapidly developing story. We'll be monitoring it closely and we'll bring you updates as they come in. Thanks for watching. If you found this report informative, please like, share, and subscribe to eGreen channel for more in-depth analysis on critical global events.